continuing now with the First Contact Project, Part 2. This is Charlie Koulas, inventor, patent lawyer. He was a programmer in the very early days, just like Tamman, whom you heard. But even earlier, to be honest. And then we'll follow that up with a few others. So yeah, the First Contact Project on NOIRtv for the first time. That's cool.
I'm all excited to use this computer, and the computer's there. I see it, the console thing, but I can't touch it, because these other geeks are in front of me, and they're never going to let me use this thing. And they say, "Oh yeah, if you want to use it, you gotta, use these punch cards." Well, they're not even punch cards; they're really like these computer cards that you used to see in the '60s. But you gotta like black out the numbers, and so that was the way I was able to like program something. Is I took this deck of cards home, and I started to like write like instructions by blocking out character by character. Like if I wanted to make an A, I'd have to go find the A and block that out. So I mean, it's really painful, So I finally finished my little program that was supposed to like add numbers together or something like that, and I bring it in, and I stick it in this machine after they let me get to it, late in the hour, and it goes chunk 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 chunk, and it reads everything in, and it's all wrong. I mean, because it's like the thing's not very precise. And so it's like, if I make one little smudge or make the circle the wrong way, it just doesn't detect it. And so I'm looking at this gibberish, and I'm feeling like, this is not fair. This is the only computer in the whole school, and why do these guys get to tell me, that I can't touch the damn thing? It's basically just a bunch of kids in a room, no adult supervision, and I'm going to start using it, because it should be for everybody, and I should have equal time. So I just get there earlier than they do the next day, and I actually use this thing, and from then on it was like this war between like me and the main guy, and the other people were kind of his followers, but he didn't like me anymore. Yeah, and he was actually this brilliant guy, and he was writing a chess program. He played chess, and so he knew that any little dinky thing I was doing as a new user was never going to be anywhere near as good as what he was doing. I can't remember his name. But he was like, he had a Russian background. He was like American born, but his was like a Russian name, Karov or something like that. I can't remember exactly. The weird thing about it is we each had our little accounts with passwords, and I found out like way later after I stopped going to that room that his password was my last name. This is like, he would do stuff like that. And he would like try to like whatever I was doing, he would try to make it more difficult for me. He'd like sabotage, like stuff that nerds think about. Like we would try to steal each other's passwords or leave the machine in a state where it'd be difficult for somebody else. I mean, it was all BS. But anyway, that was the environment that I started to learn how to program. And
how many computers have you used from that day to today, or owned? Could you even fathom a guess?
Well, I was programming computers for good 7 years professionally, and before that, as a kid, I was just doing it for fun. So I'm gonna guess like 50 or 60. I mean, I have probably 8 right now in my house. I stopped getting rid of the old ones because I noticed this trend where the newer operating systems and software and computers are less private. They have they didn't used to have machine IDs until like the early 90s, where now they could figure out each CPU has got a number in it that people can read. So they know, and they can track that back to a machine that I bought, for example. So I don't have privacy. But they didn't start doing that until a certain point. So I have my old machines, and if I ever want to be anonymous, I'll use that old machine like that.
And use your system through that machine.
Yeah, like I could still get on the internet by dialing up because there's no Ethernet card in these, But yeah, I regret getting rid of like the machines I had in the 80s. And I had an Apple II for a while. I had the TRS-80 that you mentioned in your chapter. I programmed both of those machines. I programmed tons of IBMs. I programmed mainframes, mini frames, mini computers, everything. That was Maine Township East in Illinois. And people probably don't think about Illinois as being, a cutting-edge computer, but that's...
Well, Mark Andreessen, right? I mean...
Yeah, they all came, all those internet guys. And by the way, I wrote patents for them too. They came from the University of Illinois. That's where they developed the web. It's also where they were developing a lot of the early computer components, like the UNIVAC was developed. I think it was the UNIVAC. The ELIAC was definitely developed there, and also, I mean, it's kind of known in the computer industry as being like a think tank, and talented computer people come out of there. And that's why it's mentioned in 2001: A Space Odyssey, the HAL computer that's getting shut down. It was made in Urbana, Illinois, which is the University of Illinois, which is where I went to school, and a lot of these people come from.
My first memory of a computer was, I must have been 6 or 7, and we were visiting friends of my parents in North Carolina, actually. And he was a professor and had this little Macintosh, I don't know what, it was about this big, maybe 1985 or so, 6. And he showed me the mouse and how it worked, and I drew pictures using the mouse as a 6-year-old or 7-year-old would draw. And then they showed me this program that when you type, it could speak. It was actually really advanced for what it was, 1986. So you could type and it would speak in this robot voice, and that was really cool at the time, I remember. And then they printed out on whatever kind of printer, dot matrix, I suppose, my drawing. And that was a really big deal. So that was my first computer experience. About 7, I would guess. 7 years old. And the first computer that we had was a Tandy, which is the Radio Shack brand, which was just a step up from the Commodore 64, but before the whole PC thing, IBM. And I don't know, it was a Tandy. I was like 10 or so at the time, so I don't remember. It was definitely DOS-based. It was sort of my first introduction to DOS, which later became MS-DOS, but wasn't at the time. Gray, and the screen was black with orange. It was black and orange.
Black screen with
Orange type, yeah. So it was all text-based, but they had some kind of cool text-based games, like little H's that you had to move around, and it was all using asterisks and making graphics with the text, which was fun.
Did you program?
Did I program at age 10? No. I think a little bit later in school they taught us some basic programming, but not really. The first real graphic game we had was a Sierra game called something about Mixed Up Mother Goose, I believe it was. So it was obviously aimed towards me and my younger brothers, where you had to move this little square-headed pixel guy various places. So it was two-dimensional. It was pretty advanced in picking up fairy tale and nursery rhyme pieces and moving them around. That was the first exciting game that we had.
And how many machines do you think you've owned?
Maybe 10 or 12 probably by now. We've gone through a lot of computers, and computers that I've had at school and at work, different work environments. Quite a few. Dave has Macs, I have PCs, so I'm getting bilingual, I suppose.
Experience with the internet?
The first experience was at sort of a camp that we did. I was probably 13 or 14, and this was one of the workshops, was the internet. And again, completely text-based, but the big deal was he showed us, well, you can search for anything, like a recipe for banana split, and so he types this in and it comes up with a recipe, and everybody oohs and ahs. I don't know what the search engine was, maybe Gopher or something back then, but I wasn't as impressed as I probably should have been at the time, because this was a big step, but I didn't quite grasp the enormity of this. I remember the pre-Windows environment. In fact, I was sort of refreshed with it because my computer, one of the computers at my previous job, was rather ancient, and it was the one that ran the cytometers for counting cells, so they haven't updated it because these things are really expensive, and it had DOS, and I was sort of suddenly remembered all of these old commands and all the different, like the /p so that I could see different files. Just the DOS stuff.
The Commodore was like...
It completely baffled me because each disk, the 5-inch floppy, whatever it was, would have written on it how to start the program, which is usually like California game or something like, run, quote, star, quote, comma, 8, comma, 1, and whatever we typed wouldn't work, and she would just try different things, like question mark, asterisk, like typing thing, and none of them sometimes would work, and there must have been some kind of logic to it, but since it wasn't my computer, I could never figure it out myself, and she obviously had no clue, so I just, to this day, I can't do Commodore commands. They don't make any sense to me. It's a DOS girl. I think I was young enough when the first computer that I saw, I knew that it was exciting, but I didn't understand what it was, and because they just sort of, as I cognitively sort of advanced, there were more and more computers around and just grew with it. It seems more organic, just makes sense to me that the computers, I never thought about it consciously till now. My name's Emily Reed and I'm 26.
That's good because he's followed up
The first time I
a Commodore
had
guy.
a computer, the first computer I had or experienced was the Commodore VIC-20. And I remember as my parents were arguing that I was watching too much TV, so they got rid of the television and they bought a computer, the VIC-20. Oh, that had to be like 1983, 1984, back then. And it ran software. You had a cassette, audio cassette that stored data on, like you'd store data on a CD-ROM nowadays, and it was an audio cassette, and it had this this cassette player, but it wrote and read data off of audio cassettes. And we would get this magazine, Byte, B-Y-T-E, and you could order cassettes out of it. And they also had whole programs that you could type in. They were on the page of the magazine, and you could type them in, and you'd have a simple, crude game at the end, or a drawing program, very simple, where you could draw a line. And they didn't have a mouse. It had arrow keys and did have a joystick, but it was mainly a keyboard. So, did they have machines in school? In my grade school, they did not have machines until I was in junior high. So not until I was in junior high. And I think did they have Apples? I think they had Apple II GSs or something like that. They had the Commodore 64, and my dad was kind of a computer freak because he's an engineer. Then we had Commodore, VIC-20, the +4. Then I moved up to the Commodore 64. Then I got a Commodore 128. Commodore Amiga, that was my favorite machine at the time.
Like Tamman earlier.
Then I had a IBM 386, and then I stopped using them for a couple of years until I got a job
Common theme.
in 1996 at a computer lab at a school here. And the internet was just starting, so about that time I was always on the internet. And then I got a systems engineering job during the dot-com boom, and bought a Pentium 200, and then from there I just have upgraded that. Actually, now it's running like 3.4 gigahertz with tons of hard drive and memory and a video card that has more 256 megs of RAM, and I also have a Mac iBook at home, which I use. Mark Heller, and I'm 29.
When I was a kid, I was about 10 or 11. Let's see. So I was born in 58, so this is 69, 70, something like that. I went to the Lawrence Livermore Lab in Berkeley, in the hills above Berkeley, which is a radiation laboratory. And there was a guy in a room, and it was the first time I'd ever seen a computer and a handheld computer, and he was running every possible computation on it to see if there was an error anyplace, and he found one. There was like some decimal point of multiplication that the thing was screwing up at, and we got to play with it and punch our fingers on it and stuff and add things, and so that was the first time I saw a computer. There were places that had the big weird computers, but not in that room. It was just like a guy sitting at a table with a little handheld. I mean, the first time I used one, I was, let's see, in my 20s. And I had to make a computerized design for a sign so that I can send it off to the manufacturers to have silkscreen done. So it was the first time I ever did it. It was SE, Macintosh SE. Remember those? Yeah. It was Aldus Freehand before Adobe bought them. And you know, the SEs, they had those little screen, funny little screen, black and white, no color. I can't remember. I didn't know enough about it to know like how many megabytes of memory it had or anything like that. You know, it's a long time ago. And I was a total junkie then. I remember being so high when I was doing it. Like, just sat there and was like, whoa. John Fadef, age 46.